in these times during COVID, when we're all sitting at home, it's sort of like a ray of light that we get to watch these amazing sessions when we can't all be together. It certainly brightens up my evenings.
आज पेंडेमिक में हम डिजिटली लिटरेचर फेस्टिवल कर रहे हैं और मुझे लगता है कि हमारे सामने श्रोता नहीं है, हम आपस में बात कर रहे हैं, लेकिन उस फील को, उस उमंग को महसूस कर सकते हैं कि हजारों लाखों लोग हमसे जुड़े हुए हैं, हमको सुन रहे हैं और कहीं ना कहीं कोई एक सार्थक हस्तक्षेप हो रहा है.
People who came online to view and listen to our incredible speakers from across the world, we were able to continue in our tradition of ensuring the free flow of knowledge and information.
On behalf of Namita Gokhale, William Dalrymple, Sanjoy Roy, and all my colleagues at Teamwork Arts, we welcome you to a new book launch at JLF First Edition. We're delighted to host the launch of Azra Raza's work, The First Set, published by HarperCollins India. Celebrated oncologist and author Azra Raza is a professor of medicine and director of the MDS Center at Columbia University. Her new book, The First Set, presents a new paradigm in the ongoing battle against cancer, a lyrical journey from hope to despair and back again. The narrative ties together medicine and society. Raza's book emphasizes the need for empathy, intelligence, and optimism as a foundational tenet for new and groundbreaking research, and explores cancer from multiple angles: medical, scientific, cultural, and personal. Azra Raza is the Chan Soon Cheong Professor of Medicine and the Director of the MDS Center at the Columbia University. In addition to publishing widely in basic and clinical cancer research, Raza is also the co-editor of the highly acclaimed website, 3quarksdaily.com. Azra Raza, thank you for joining us here today. And congratulations on your latest brilliant book. We would love to hear you speak and share your experiences on working on this book.
Thank you so much to you and to JLF for inviting me. Special thanks are due to my colleague, Siddhartha Mukherjee, who has helped me actually launch the last book launch in Pakistan, and the one before that actually in the US. So he and I have become quite a team together now in launching this book. Thank you so much, Sid, for you taking out the time always to do it. I'd like to begin by just making a couple of points here and then turn it back to you. Obviously, I'm, as you mentioned, I'm a practicing oncologist who sees 30 to 40 cancer patients every week. I also supervise a cutting-edge cancer research lab, the space that I share with Siddhartha Mukherjee at work. And many of our projects are, of course, done together. But I think most importantly, I'm also a cancer widow. So I have had the misfortune of standing on both sides of the bed as a caretaker as well as a caregiver. And so these three credentials have given me a perspective of cancer that I wouldn't wish on my enemy. And that was one of the reasons that finally forced me to really question some of what is going on in oncology right now. And it's a very opportune time to be talking about it because this year is the 50th anniversary in America of the declaration of the so-called war on cancer by President Nixon in 1971. The obvious question to be asked is, are we winning the war or not? And in my opinion, it is an unmitigated disaster. The second point that has bothered me so much is that we have spent in the last 50 years 95% of our resources trying to chase down the last cancer cell and kill it. And it has ended up in producing basically Paleolithic treatments to treat cancer. And so I'm asking for a complete revolution in oncology, from going after the last cell to trying to find the first cell and prevent cancer from becoming the end stage monstrosity that is so hard to handle. Third point I want to make is that we must monitor wellness to find illness. So let's start by trying to find the first cell in people who are well right now, who don't have cancer, but who are at high risk for it. And we'll talk more. I'm sure Sid will ask me about it when we start the conversation. And finally, I want to make a direct appeal to my Indian audience. You have some of the best brains in the world, and a lot of them. You have all the skills, all the technology, all the resources, all the money, all the patience. What's stopping you from finding the first cell? Why do we have to keep aping the West and trying to replicate what is happening in the West and reproduce it in our countries? No, we can do better than that. Our patients deserve better, because those kinds of technologies are not applicable to so many patients in India. So these are some of the things that bother me. That what is lacking is not resources, not the suffering of humanity, but the will to do something about it. And the will has to come by public pressure. And this is why I wrote the book.
Thank you. Thank you, Azra Raza, for sharing all that with us. JLF First Edition is delighted to launch the first cell. Today, together with Pulitzer Prize-winning author and oncologist Siddhartha Mukherjee, Azra will explore the complex tapestry of the disease and stress the need to refocus their attention to the beginning rather than the end. Siddhartha Mukherjee is a cancer physician and researcher, a stem cell biologist, and a cancer geneticist. He is the author of The Laws of Medicine and the Emperor of All Maladies, a biography of cancer, which won the 2011 Pulitzer Prize in General Nonfiction and the Guardian First Book Award. Please feel free to ask questions and comment by typing it into the comment section. Ladies and gentlemen, we now present the first cell, Azra Raza, in conversation with Siddhartha Mukherjee. Over to you, Siddhartha.
Well, thank you very much. Azra, congratulations on the book. Congratulations on the launch in India. We are going to be in conversation for, I think, about half an hour, and then we have time for some questions. So let me begin by asking you, when I first read the book, I read a very early version of the book, and obviously was deeply affected, deeply impressed. I want to talk a little bit about the fact that this is not one book, but 3 books. This is a personal biography of you, as you said, as a cancer widow, including the time before you were a cancer widow, a cancer caregiver. People who read this book will know that Azra's husband died, very prominent cancer researcher himself, died of cancer under very tragic circumstances when her daughter was very young. So this is a biography of that. It is that journey. The second thing is that there is a historic journey as well. You talked about the war on cancer, what has gone right, what's gone wrong, why we are here, how we got here, etc. And the third book is a polemic, a plea to do something different about what happens, and the science that will drive a new way of thinking about about cancer. So I want to talk about all these three books in some ways separately, but also intertwine them. But the book begins with, of course, your personal journey, the journey of your husband's cancer. There's an extraordinarily moving moment in the book which left an image in my brain of you going to the airport, taking a flight, and your husband suddenly breaking out into terrifying sweats, and really being unable to even function. Tell us a little bit about your what changed, or the change that happens to someone, to you. Tell us about the change in your family. Tell us about that journey a little bit, so that readers know that you're not just a cancer doctor, but a cancer caregiver, and, as you say, a cancer widow.
Thank you so much, Sid, for starting with that personal journey. Before I answer your question, though, I'd like your advice about something, which is, I was speaking to Barkha Dutt on an interview yesterday, and she asked me not exactly this question, but she asked me, Azra, how did you change after your husband's disease, illness, and as you took care of him? And I was telling her that it didn't change me as an oncologist, really, but it changed my perceptions of life forever. But then when I looked at the kind of remarks that I got on this talk yesterday, most of them are horrifying remarks saying, what kind of a doctor is this? What kind of an oncologist is she, that she only became aware of pain when she shared a pain of cancer patients when she shared a bed with a cancer patient, type of thing. I want your advice about how do we handle this kind of an issue? If I talk about my personal story, it is as if I don't care about other patients, and I'm only aware of the issues of cancer because it struck my own home.
Well, I mean, there's no advice here. The only advice I have to give, I would tell you, is to ignore those comments, because, first of all, they're untrue. I know you, and I know the book. I know how you've taken care of patients over decades. And it's simply not true. It is the idea that the personal and the medical are intertwined is so old. It originates in the beginnings of medicine, and so the absurdity of your not being influenced as an oncologist is an absurdity. But on the other hand, let me turn the question back to you. I mean, obviously, your experience, there is nothing, whatever people say, there is nothing that will substitute for the personal experience of grief. That doesn't mean that grief, that does mean that grief spills over into every aspect of your life. And certainly as a doctor, this is an ancient discipline where, we deal with grief on a daily basis. We are the merchants of grief. And so leaving aside the absurdity of those comments, tell us about how it changed you personally, we know from the book, but how it changed your practice as an oncologist.
Thank you so much for making those comments. I wanted them to come from you so that people do understand that at every level, even when we are using the most precise of sciences, we are trying to also basically precisely catalog the sensorial issues with the same precision. And that it's not just, I mean, cancer is not just a disease, it is an illness. And what's the difference between disease and illness is that disease is something that oncologists will diagnose. But illness is something patients feel. And of course, all diseases are the same, but cancer is particularly so simply because it can affect all the organs. It's just the name cancer, the word cancer, it has got a stigma with it. It's got such horrifying perceptions that come with it. The whole family is affected. I want to be very honest by saying that when I began to write the book, I had no intention of telling anything about my personal story. And people who have known me for years knew that 20 years had gone by since my own husband died. I had never talked about it. But you know, Sid, what happened to me is when I started writing my other patients, and I looked at the granularity of detail with which I was writing about their pain, their suffering, their emotional upheavals, I felt that it would be insincere. I somehow felt it would be dishonest not to talk about my own pain, protect myself and my family, and expose everybody else. But once I started to then write about Harvey and what happened to me, then like you pointed out, it became a red line going through every chapter of the book.
And that's what makes the book very, very strong, Azra. You know, the red line is of course the line that connects you with your patients, you with your husband, you with your family. And it brings us to the questions that we need to ask, which is, you know, why did he suffer? What does suffering mean? At one point of time, you know, there's a line in one of the recent pieces that I wrote, which talks about the half-life of grief. There is no half-life of grief. There's a half-life of radioactivity, but there is no half-life of grief. 20 years is 40 years, 40 years is 80 years, 80 years is 160 years, and there is no half-life. And what's interesting about the book is that we realize that there is no half-life. It transmutes, your grief transmutes. It becomes, you know, Harvey is gone, you have a child to raise by yourself, but that half-life now becomes a different kind of, you know, way that you are dealing with your life. And of course, it becomes a compassion that you already had for your patients, but a realization of, you know, that you have also gone through you have crossed the Rubicon yourself. And that's what makes you an even better oncologist in some ways. So let's turn a little bit away from the personal to the historical journey. You know, as you said, we happen to be celebrating a milestone moment in American history. Tell us your impression about, you know, you've been involved with this right from the beginning. You've been very close to the National Cancer Institute. You're a student of history. Tell me about sort of what went right and what went wrong, and why things went right and wrong.
Sid, I feel that there is a lot that has gone right in the last 50 years. And for example, there were many disparate efforts looking at cancer. So the first thing the war on cancer did was to bring all these together under one umbrella. It really unified and made it much stronger by bringing some method to the madness. Secondly, I think it laid the foundation of doing clinical trials. It laid the foundation of collecting large amounts of data from patients. I think it opened the whole area of supportive care for patients. I think it did a lot to take away the stigma of cancer. Women could talk openly about having breast cancer, about having ovarian cancer, etc. And I think the biggest thing it did is to invest a lot of money in deep and basic cancer research that has led to a dramatic improvement, literally in quantum leaps in our understanding at a very molecular genetic level, our understanding of cancer. So all of these things are fantastic. But I do think that on the other hand, so this is all that has gone right. Also, let me not forget, it opened the whole area and funded the whole area of anti-smoking campaigns, anti-obesity campaigns, screening measures, mammograms, colonoscopy, PSA, pap smears. So all of these are fabulous successes. But why did I say it is a spectacular failure at the start of this? Is because while the patients have indirectly benefited from all this, the truth is that if somebody presents with an advanced glioblastoma, which is a brain tumor, or a stage 4, let's say, pancreatic cancer, or a stage 4 ovarian cancer, then their outcome is really no different today than it was in 1930. And that's a spectacular failure to me. The other thing is, yes, we are curing 2/3 of the patients who are diagnosed with cancer today, but my question is, curing with what? The same slash poison burn by and large. So where has all that $250 billion, a $250 billion in basic research, where are the new cancer treatments for the most common types of cancers? Yes, there have been advances, but not the way they should have been, not the way they were envisioned. And the last thing I want to say is I think there is a misunderstanding about President Nixon's declaration of war. He declared war on cancer with the goal of eliminating the disease, not understanding the disease. You see, to understand so complex a disease as cancer will take 1,000 years. The idea is somehow find it early, eliminate it before understanding everything about it. It's like saying, I don't have to understand every single intracellular molecular pathway of my digestive system to enjoy my meal.
I want to talk a little bit about those failures, but turn the conversation now towards making them into successes. So this is the third strand of the book, which is in which you propose a new way forward. So talk to us about the new way forward, and then let's dive a little bit more deeply into what that new way forward might look like.
I think totally an exciting area, and I'm so optimistic, and that's how I really have talked about at the end in the book about the excitement I feel. For example, this pandemic gave me an opportunity to put together an amazing think tank, because I've always felt that sole single voices really, especially in science, can be easily drowned out. But if we build a consensus around something, if we bring together a number of really first-rate scientists and thought leaders in the field, then because of that consensus, there is greater power to it. So I put together this think tank of 30 top leaders in the country from Columbia, Harvard, Hopkins, MD Anderson, University of Chicago, Northwestern University, City of Hope in LA, and Joplin, Missouri. These are some of the best minds in the country. You are one of them, Sid. You are part of this think tank. And we had 17 2-hour-long meetings. Now imagine having 30 people who pretty much all of them think that they're halfway to Stockholm to pick up their Nobel Prize. But bringing them together for 17 meetings, 2 hours each, and really debating every aspect of cancer, and then coming up with an opinion paper, which a consensus of it, that you and I, with the 30 other leaders, published in Scientific American in January of this year. And the bottom line that we all agreed on is that in the future, our goal in cancer research and treatment must be to find the first cell as early as possible and try to prevent it immediately, right there and then, arrest it and prevent it from progressing. And towards this goal, we all concluded that the best way to do it would be to start by trying to find early cancer. You see, by early, I don't mean stage 1 or stage 2 cancer, because that already requires, surgeries and chemotherapies. We are talking about way before the first stage. And when even in stage 1 cancers, there are millions and millions of cells, how do we find the first cell? Well, we suggested that we should start by looking at people who are at high risk of getting cancer, but don't have cancer yet. One of those groups we picked, and all these universities have agreed to put these high-risk individuals on to this First Cell Center for Early Detection of Cancer. And the idea is we will start saving samples of blood, saliva, urine, feces, hair, nails from these individuals periodically. And within 3 years, we will have 50,000 individuals. 2,000 of them will have developed cancer, and we will have all the early samples on these 2,000 individuals. And that's where we are going to find the earliest footprints of cancer, even maybe before the appearance of the first cell. And that's when, once we find it, we understand what it is, we can go ahead and look at healthy people and monitor them for the appearance of the first cell. And the last thing I want to end by saying is that, look, why should it be just you and me, Sid, and 30 other leaders or 8 universities? I'm asking, in fact, in the book over and over, that sure, we have cancer patients today, we have to take care of them, and we should spend 50% of our resources doing just that, but not hurting them, at least. Not giving them treatments that produce no benefit for 80% patients. The benefit they produced in 20% lasts, improves survival by 2 months, and financially ruins 42% of people being diagnosed with cancer in America today. Financially completely ruins them. We shouldn't use those treatments. I'm saying 50% of the resources should be used for current cancer patients for better things. The other 50% we should invest in studying how to find the first cell and financially incentivizing this new goal of the first cell. And then everyone will want to turn around when the money is there. The pot of money that they want to compete for is now in the first cell. More and more good minds will go for it. And India, you should definitely do it.
I want to talk a little bit about the strategies that came out of these meetings that you organized. One very important question was how to maximize the capture of patients who are likely to develop cancer. Obviously, if you're doing a study and only 0.00001% of those patients develop cancer in the next 5 years, then of course, your study has to be massive in order to capture that one patient. What are the strategies that we can use to find patients who are at a much greater likelihood of developing cancer? And how do we intend to involve these strategies such that we get really meaningful results as people deposit all these samples into the repository that you've called for?
As you know, we debated a lot, Sid, about who are the people at high risk. And I think you had summarized it very well in one of the meetings, that basically people who are born with some genetic susceptibility, there are certain syndromes, certain mutations. Many people know about BRCA1 and 2 mutations that put women at high risk of getting ovarian or breast cancers. There are other syndromes like mutations in P53 gene, the Leigh-Fermani syndrome. That's one group. A second group is people who have been exposed to toxins, such as people who have received chemotherapy, radiation therapy. So these cancer survivors are at risk of another cancer. I think, another group is people like who are heavy smokers and also have lung disease in addition. So that combination also puts people at higher risk of getting lung cancer. We debated a lot about which particular group should we pick. And in the end, after a lot of debate, we fixated and focused on people who have been treated for one cancer already for a couple of very good reasons. One is that in America, 1 in 5 new cancers is diagnosed in a cancer survivor. Second is that people who have been treated for one cancer, even if they're cured, they keep coming to the medical center for checkups, regular checkups. So they're already connected. And we have this amazing population of patients who are cancer survivors. I mean, think of it, Sid, that MD Anderson Cancer Center in Houston sees 80,000 cancer survivors a year. 80,000. That's a wonderful number. In the country, in America, there's like 16 to 17 million cancer survivors now. So we fixated on this group. They're coming to the cancer centers. We can get samples from them periodically as they come. And when they develop cancer, and they have, I don't want to scare anybody, please don't. And a lot of people have had cancer who are listening to this talk. I'm not telling you you're going to develop cancer. It's a very slightly higher percentage of cancers, but people who keep coming to the center because they want checkups, it's easier to follow them.
So as we tie up and move towards the questions, what's the next book you're going to write?
You know, Sid, I grew up in Karachi, Pakistan, and one reason that I left my beloved city was that I felt after becoming a doctor that if I stayed back, I would not be able to follow my heart's quest, which is the scientific and intellectual challenge of finding. Of studying cancer. I was fascinated since I was 18 about the fact that within our body, there is a cell that has found the key to immortality, to live forever. There is no other life form on this planet which has done that. And I was so fascinated as a young person that I would love to understand how this cell has done it. And then that would give us the key to agelessness, basically. But I knew that if I stayed back in Pakistan, I wouldn't be able to do the science because I would become an activist. And so I came to America because this is the country that has the most affluence and is able to invest in science with impunity, really, and with great generosity. I have to say that whether the president is Trump or Mr. Biden, they equally understand the importance of research and development and investment in these areas. And so I came to America with the idea that now I'll be able to do the real science and help my patients. But guess what? After 40 years, I've become an activist. So the fate has followed me from Pakistan to here. And I was thinking about it a lot in this last year, which we, all of us due to the pandemic have had social isolation, a lot of time to think about these things. So when you ask me what is the next book I'm going to write, I don't know about the book, but I'm writing a series of essays to clear the cobwebs in my own head about so what is the exact route to the first cell and how difficult it is to even cite the earliest changes that are occurring in the body that gives rise to the appearance of the first cell. So I would say that the kind of things I'm imagining at the moment are how to get fastest to trapping the first cell and eliminating it. And a lot is going on in the country. Bring it together.
Great. I think we are now going to move on to some questions. And so let me ask you the first one. This is from Arpana. She asks, tell us a little about the First Cell Center for cancer survivors. What stage is it at right now? Obviously, she's very interested. Tell us about the scale of the project.
Wonderful. Thank you for asking that question, because great news is that after trying for a few months, once we reached a consensus that this was the right thing to do, the obvious issue was to raise money. We went to the National Cancer Institute first, and we were spurned, so to say. I went to private sources, and we have been able to raise $15 million for the center immediately, because private investors see the logic of what we are saying, and they see that this can happen very fast, very quickly. I do feel that in order to change any paradigm, we have to show success of the new one. When the word processor came around, nobody thinks of the typewriter. When we start showing the success of the first cells detection and prevention, nobody is going to worry about what kind of end stage therapies we were developing. The center is fully funded now for the full 3 years. All the 8 universities are fully on board. Number 3, we have the protocol was written and submitted to institutional review boards, and these are going through the multiple steps. We are hoping that within the next 2 to 3 months, we will start actually depositing samples in the central facility, which will be Columbia University. As you know, I have already collected 60,000 samples on thousands of my patients since 1984. So we have all the experience where we know exactly what to do and how to maintain a tissue repository. So I think samples will start arriving. Now, this is just depositing samples in the tissue repository. Once we have the 2,000 individuals who out of 50,000 who have developed a second cancer, and we have all these samples, how do we go study them? Give me some advice. But one thing I was thinking of was that there are 16 million cancer survivors in America. Even if 1 million of them just give us $10 a month for a year. What's $10 a month? The price of a Starbucks coffee with a bagel. If they give us $10 a month just for 1 year, we'll have $110 million and enough to really go and study and interrogate all the samples we want using multi-omics technology and everything else that we are planning to do. So I think the Cancer Center for Cancer Survivors is pretty much rolling on the way, and we are going to pick up speed, and this is going to happen very quickly. And within the first year, we'll start to see results, because we'll have 500 second cancer patients already in the first year.
There is a question from Lipika, it's a very practical question, but I think that there's so much interest in this, in the practicalities, that I will ask it. It's a very down in the weeds question, but I think it's important enough, especially in the Indian context. What is the current status of correlation between COVID-19 and cancer? But the second question I think is probably more important. How are cancer patients dealing with the vaccine? Are they allowed to take it? And what do we know about the response of cancer patients to COVID vaccination? What are you doing? And how are we dealing with the intersection of COVID and cancer?
Sid, I'll answer the COVID vaccine for cancer patients question a little, but then you need to answer the first part. Why don't you go ahead and answer the first part?
Well, so, I have to say that, we've been doing a lot of research. We were able to collect, Azra, I don't even know if I've told you about this project. but it's been in the news a lot, and it's in submission to Nature. But we collected very granular data on 1 million patients who were vaccinated in Bahrain. The data is extraordinarily granular in age, comorbidities, everything for these patients. And so we are now searching that database to see how, because the comorbidities do record cancer. And we're searching that database to see at a systematic level, not an anecdotal level, but at a systematic level, what is the response rate. And what's nice about it is that most of the studies that have looked at this so far, the question, have looked at the question by measuring antibodies and other things in the blood, what we call surrogates. This study measures whether the patients are actually being hospitalized, whether they're getting infected, what strain they're getting infected with, whether they're going to the ICU, and whether they're dying. So we will have extraordinarily granular data on 1 million patients to tell us exactly how they're responding, not just using surrogates, but using really, clinical outcomes. And we hope to, obviously present this to the world, because it's an incredibly important resource for cancer patients.
I hope you've added the BCG part to it. Have they received BCG vaccine?
They have not, because it was not a BCG-rich nation. And as you know, the controversy about BCG still continues. It's been very difficult to figure out whether BCG is a surrogate, whether it's what the relationship is, but this study does not have any information on BCG.
Well, the thing that has affected me, Sid, is that in America, especially in New York and Boston, where the data are available, people who are living in homeless shelters, they have some of the most impoverished, horrible conditions that they're living under. And the COVID infection rate is high there, but no one or very few people have died in homeless shelters. And the easier explanation for it, of course, there's no proof for any of it, is that they have been exposed to TB, they have latent TB, or they have some non-specific stimulation of their immune system, which has helped them deal with this virus as well. Anyway, that's would be very interesting. I think only someone like you with your reach could have done this study in Bahrain. I hope when I finish, you'll tell the story of how you got to do it, because that story you told me. Anyway, the answer to the vaccine question for cancer patients is yes, they must get it actually. What we try to do is at least let 2 weeks pass after they've had chemotherapy and let 2 weeks before they get the next round of chemotherapy. And then you're perfectly safe in giving it. And except for very few kinds of patients, somebody undergoing a transplant, because we have such severe immune suppression in those people to try and get over the graft versus host disease, that they require full vaccination afterwards, even vaccination that they had received as children for say tetanus and diphtheria and polio have to all be repeated after they finish with the immune suppression. Except for patients like that, vaccines are and must be given to cancer patients. But Sid, do tell them about how you got to do the Bahrain study.
Well, I'll tell them very quickly. I was at a conference and I was...
The Google conference, everyone. The Google conference. Sid is being modest, but of course, his fame in America is in the stratosphere. So he's always invited to the top conferences. And this thing happened at Google conference. Go ahead. So
I was giving a talk on COVID and cancer, and I saw these two people furiously exchanging cell phones while this was happening. So at the end of my talk, I went up to them and I said, "Who are you?" Because I'm very blunt. And the guy said, "I'm the Crown Prince of Bahrain, and this is the Minister of Health of Bahrain." I mean, this is kind of a magical story. You don't get this on a day-to-day basis. And I said, "Well, why are you exchanging your cell phones?" And they said, "Well, because we get, every hour we get an update on the COVID task force in Bahrain, and we have 1 million patients that we have all this granular data on in a huge Excel spreadsheet. And I said, well, have you thought about publishing it? And they said, oh, what do you mean publishing it? This is for our own internal use. And I said, the entire world is waiting for this data. What is the level of breakthrough infection? What is happening during Delta, et cetera, et cetera. So they were able to share with us. We used Google's extraordinary analytical powers to be able to process the data. And that's what we brought up into the world. But let's end on a hopeful note, Azra. Your book has caused waves across the world. It has caused waves at the National Cancer Institute. Our group spoke with Doug Lewy at the National Cancer Institute, and he was extraordinarily impressed about the effort and was very supportive of it. The idea that once you detect the first cancer cell, just give us a picture of what will happen to that patient. What happens next?
Well, what we are aiming for with the biomedical engineers at Columbia University, first of all, is to develop a tiny little chip. I hope you can see this, which can be inserted under the skin, which can be inserted at birth in little babies, which will constantly monitor for the appearance of the first cell that can be detected by simply putting a tiny device that passes over this chip under the skin, and through ultrasonic technology can detect the collection of cells that's happening. So first of all, we want to be able to do that. Second, what if we detect the first cell? Now what? Well, now it can be killed by targeted therapies. All the therapies you are developing, Sid, the cell therapies that you're developing that can be directed to with exquisite precision to target some molecule on an abnormal cell. Instead of using toxic radiation therapy, we can use laser-guided therapies to get rid of these fractions of cells circulating. We can use things like antibodies attached to sensors that can go and specifically identify and so the idea is that there's a lot that is available already that can be applied. A lot cannot be applied, of course, because we don't need to give a bone marrow transplant to someone who has 1,000 first cells. Of course not. The treatment
but
is
the technologies are limitless, and we have the capacity to explore them. So, Azra, I wanted to thank you for your contribution. I'm sure the readers of your book will be edified. There's much, much more, I assure you, in the book. And turn it back to Shaurupa to end this wonderful session.
Azra and Siddharth, thank you. Thank you for that vital conversation, sharing personal stories, perspectives, and information that is so useful for all of us. Thank you. We would like to share with all of you that JLF London at the British Library will be presented from the 24th to the 26th of September. Please do register to receive information and to be able to watch the fabulous sessions that are in store for you. If you enjoyed watching our sessions, please leave a like on our videos. It helps in bringing more new content to you. Subscribe to our channel for more sessions like this and click the bell notification icon to stay up to date on any new videos we release. We'd like to hear from you on our sessions, on all these sessions that we showcase. So please do leave us a comment in the comment section. And we hope that you will stay logged on to watch our next session, An Island, Karen Jennings in conversation with Wangmai Parakala. This will be broadcast here at 8:30 p.m. IST. See you.
In these times during COVID, when we're all sitting at home, it's sort of like a ray of light that we get to watch these amazing sessions when we can't all be together. It certainly brightens up my evenings.
आज पेंडेमिक में हम डिजिटली लिटरेचर फेस्टिवल कर रहे हैं और मुझे लगता है कि हमारे सामने श्रोता नहीं है, हम आपस में बात कर रहे हैं, लेकिन उस फील को, उस उमंग को महसूस कर सकते हैं कि हजारों लाखों लोग हमसे जुड़े हुए हैं, हमको सुन रहे हैं और कहीं ना कहीं कोई एक सार्थक हस्तक्षेप हो रहा है.
People who came online to view and listen to our incredible speakers from across the world, we were able to continue in our tradition of ensuring the free flow of knowledge and information.